Holly Henn, President and CEO of Critical Business Analysis, and today I am with Jason Schroeder from Takt Planning, and we're going to talk about what Takt Planning is. Jason, I met you a very long time ago through the company that I worked for at the time, had a co-sharing committee with the company that you worked for at the time, and it was designed to discuss scheduling issues.
Okay.
Scheduling problems that our companies had, or just to kind of co-share best practices and the different things that our companies were doing. You weren't part of that committee for very long when you left, and your replacement brought you in for one of our meetings to talk about Takt Planning and what you were doing with Takt Planning and what you were doing with your new company that you had developed, Elevate Construction.
Yeah.
And that's my initial introduction to you. And then I saw you at a conference I went to with that company I was working for, where you gave a presentation on Takt Planning. That's how I know you in the industry. And then I follow you on LinkedIn and I see all the things that you're doing, and I think that they are just incredibly important to the construction industry. From safety, if our jobs are better planned and better thought out and everybody knows what it is that inherently makes the job safer, to just being more efficient and effective with our resources and our time, and that values the people who are doing the work.
I love it.
And I really appreciate what you're bringing to the construction industry.
Well, thank you. I'm super happy to talk about this today. This is fun. Jason Schroeder with Elevate Construction, and that is our parent company for other businesses, namely Lean Tact, Lean Superintendent, Lean Wellness, and Lean Survey. And then we also have a construction company, which is Lean Built, and a trade partner company, which is Final Phase, that does construction cleaning for commercial construction projects. And the point there is to have a showcase for implementing all of the things that we teach about, like Paul Akers does with his manufacturing facility. And so I am a career worker, foreman, field engineer, superintendent, field operations director, and then finished my career as a project director. And I didn't get an opportunity to go to school, so I worked my way up through the ranks and then started Elevate Construction in share as much information as we possibly could with the industry, because we just have a love for the folks out there, and we feel like there's amazing builders and that those builders need or deserve amazing systems. Kate is the CEO of our company, and it's very earned. It wasn't a family thing, more so it was an experience qualifications thing. She's an amazing CEO, and I'm the COO of the company, and we have 11 kids, and our partner Kevin Rice helps us with all of these businesses as the Chief Visionary Officer. Our focuses are consulting, training, and project support, and then doing showcases with our general contracting company and our trade partner companies.
Jason, why don't you kind of explain to me at a high level, why is Takt Planning important to a project health?
That's an awesome comment and question. Takt planning, well, let me put it back in the framework, and I don't know that this is the only thing that it can be called. It can be called by many different things, but we call it the integrated production control system, which means that we plan a project properly in pre-construction, and that really ties into the book How Big Things Get Done, and we plan it on a rhythm, and that's where Takt Planning comes in, and we do it with the trade partners, which is the last planner system that everybody knows. So I plan the project on a rhythm with the trade partners. And Takt, as I'm sure we're going to talk about here in the future, is a German word for rhythm or baton. It's an older word, and the reason that the industry uses it is because Taiichi Ohno mentioned it or used that term in lean manufacturing with Toyota, and specifically in the book Toyota Production System by Taiichi Ohno. And that's how the word stuck, but really it means scheduling on a rhythm. Scheduling on a rhythm. There's a big problem with most traditional industry scheduling systems in the fact that it increases work in progress above the capacity of resources. And contrary to what's maybe intuitive to the human mind, that enters the project into a downward productivity spiral. Meaning, like, humans typically think if you add more people, you'll produce more. That's just not true. If we rush, push, and panic people, they'll produce more. That's just not true. If we bring all the materials out to site all at once, we'll do more. That's just not true. But those are the things that we as superintendents and PMs have been taught, but that is actually the worst thing to do if we want to produce. Most industry scheduling systems will do a forward and backward pass and try to start everything on its early start. which increases work in progress, which means it's only the demand side of the equation. The supply side is not considered. Even when you identify resource logic ties and you consider resources in those scheduling systems, they still don't flow. So what Takt Planning does is puts the entire production plan in a time by location format so that we can actually visually see trades flowing from zone to zone to zone. The other thing that it does, actually I'll just give you a couple of the benefits. You immediately are able to see bottlenecks like Eliyahu Goldratt talks about in the goal and in the theory of constraints and in critical chain. And you're actually also able to speed up phases by zoning them properly. I'll give you for instance, if you have a 60,000 square foot floor and you break it up into 2 zones, you could be looking at depending on what trades you have going through there, at like 135 day duration. You break that into, instead of 2 zones, into 6 zones, you can gain 20, 30, 40 days on your schedule through acceleration. And here's what I want everybody to hear: without shortening any trade durations. And so Takt Planning, A, aligns supply and demand, B, respects trade partners and people by keeping them on a rhythm, and C, allows us to accelerate projects through the science of Takt Planning. And it's very visual. And the last thing I would say is it complies with all known, and I'll say known to me, lean principles. And so it's the core, like the center, like the hub of a wheel, or the center before the spokes on a bike tire. It's the central theme of lean thinking, because it is the way to organize everything into one piece or one process flow.
Let's talk about tact zones, tact time, tact wagon, tact production flow. A little bit more into the nuts and bolts of what tact planning looks like visually and some of the vocabulary used when you're talking about tact planning.
Getting into some of the components of Takt Planning so people understand the words, because a lot of these terms are really new, like you said, Holly, right? So there's a couple of key ones that I want people to know. Number one, and these aren't exactly terms, but starting with time on the top on our production plans and location on the left, which means on the left, and I don't want to make it too complex, but it's functional area, phase, area, zone. And if you want to simplify it, it's phase, zone. And all a phase is in construction Takt Planning, which is probably universal, is it's an area of work that has its own zones. So like the exterior phase has its own unique zones. The roof has its own unique zones. Structure has its own unique zones. So that also ties really nicely, because those exterior, roof, structure, interiors, site work, those are phases that we commonly recognize in construction anyway. So they have a start and an end milestone, and it provides a really, really nice framework. And so the phase is the core piece that we need to understand in Takt Planning. And I can break it down into a couple of components. Number one, takt wagons. All a takt wagon is a grouping of work that fits into a zone according to a takt time. That's it. It's the intersection. Well, what is takt time? It's the rhythm at which the trades move from zone to zone. Well, what is a takt zone? It's a production area that's right-sized for flow and for ideal speed. And so this, if somebody's listening to this, hopefully this will come across well. There's a formula that comes from Dr. Marco Vinegar and Dr. Janos Louis, and it says takt wagons, which is your grouping of work, plus takt zones, which are your production areas, minus 1, multiplied by the takt time, which is your rhythm, will calculate the overall throughput time, or the overall duration for the phase. And just like with anybody who's been through Algebra 1 or Algebra 2 in high school, you know that you can change the variables in that equation and get different outputs. And one of the main inputs that you can change to get a different output is the changing of the number of zones you have for the phase. Like I already said, if you have 2 zones in a 60,000 square foot floor versus 6, you're going to go slower with 2 zones, and you're going to go much, much faster when you go to 6 zones. Now, when I talk about that, like the original zone size was like 30,000 square feet. When you go to 6 zones, it's only 10,000 square feet. But trade partners can fit in the zone, work well in the zone, stretch out in the zone, have enough work ahead of them in the zone. It's a beautiful production area. And you go faster because you release work in one process flow to other trade partners sooner. The last thing that I would say is that when you do that and you have the right number of takt wagons, the right number of zones, and you package work properly, you have a really nice, beautifully flowing And at the end of the phase, you can even gain or have buffers. And every schedule in construction should have buffers. The concept of having a critical path with zero float, where if any activity is delayed, it would delay the entire schedule, is dangerous. Every phase in the entire project schedule should have buffers to absorb impacts. That's completely in line with the critical chain concepts and the work that Eliyahu Goldratt did with his book, The Goal. You have to have buffers to absorb those impacts. And this now ties beautifully into the last planner system. Let me tell you why. Because you can create a one-page overall master schedule with all of your phases, beautifully detailed out with tact wagons, tact zones, and your tact time in each phase. And then where do you pull plan? You pull plan by phase. And then what do you do with the pull plan? Well, you package it into tact wagons. Well, what do you do from there? Well, that repeats down through the zones. And now you have a plan. And then when you do your 6-week look-ahead planning and weekly work planning and day planning, it's all vertically aligned to that phase in a beautiful flow. And instead of thinking that there's just one critical path with certain critical activities, you now can see a couple of things. You can see trade bottlenecks. You can see zone bottlenecks. You can see your most limiting factor. And it's beautiful because now you have a system that pairs with the amazing people in construction. And so those are some of the terms that I think will really help people to understand it. And it's actually not too complicated, and it fits perfectly with Last Planner.
How do you help your clients identify the rhythm? How do you look at drawings and walk us through that process of you're in pre-construction, you're at the beginning, you have preliminary drawings, right? Because that's kind of where this is ideal to apply. It's not that you can't apply tact planning at any point during the project, right? But it's most effective at the beginning of a project when you're planning and you're starting to put that plan together and you're starting to put drawings together and you're phasing or you're putting bid documents together, scope documents. How do you help identify the rhythm of that tact time when you're looking at a project?
I love that. One thing that I want to start out with is that tact planning applies to any type of project. There's a misconception in the industry that it's only good for multifamily or repetitive projects, and that's just not true. We do tact planning with amazing results on airports, laboratories, schools, high-end architectural, civil, like anything. And that will become clear in the process that I'm about to talk about. The first thing, you're spot on. We research the drawings and at a high level understand how everything flows. And actually, I don't know how detailed you want to get, but we identify functional areas first. There's so many mega projects out there. You can't run one like $1.55 billion project as one project. You have to break it up. So functional areas are breaking those big projects up. Then second, making sure that we understand the phases, which is pretty simple. And then getting a preliminary zone count for each of the phases. And that comes from the builders. So that's all good. Up to this point, normal stuff. We are nowadays describing every one of those phases and zones and putting them into AI and having AI analyze the ideal flow. One quick example on that. If you go, I remember in Scottsdale, there was a core and shell building with really high-end exterior finishes. And the superintendent and company that we took over for, meaning they were removed, we were brought on, when I was working for a general contractor, they just said north, east, southwest for the exterior. But when you break up production areas, you actually find it's northeast, southeast side, southwest side, west, north central, east, southeast, southwest, and then northwest on the exit. And people are like, wait a minute, why would I sequence the exterior like that? But you find out, and Holly, you're nodding your head, I'm sure you've done this so many times, that we needed to sequence it like that to take care of the exit and the hoist. The southeast wasn't ready for the eaves, and the southwest needed time for the exterior scrim and shade structure to be put in place before we could do our work. So the sequence that we analyzed was actually perfect, and the exterior contractors loved it, and we shaved 3 months off of the schedule. So that's one of the first things that we do is analyze phases and zones. Then when we get down to the phases, and the superintendents and PM tell us, hey, what is the number of zones that you think this will want? What does the building want this to be? They'll be like, okay, I think we're going to break this up into 6 zones. Well, we put it into the calculator, and our calculator says, well, what if it was 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, all of these different permutations of zones and configurations, and it tells us what the duration will adjust to. And I want to remind everybody that any option has the same duration for the trade, meaning their individual activities never get shortened, but because of how we break it down, the actual throughput time for the phase shortens.